the butterfly pose in a reclining position, I like to do something underneath my back. If you have it handy, a throw pillow, a folded blanket. And if you have a blanket, not too different from this one. Now I folded this 3 times. Once fringes together, and then once the opposite direction, then one more time to get this size. And then if you just fold it into thirds, that's almost a pranayama bolster. So it's almost the kind of bolster that's intended for what I'm about to do. This is a little bigger than that, so but a blanket would work. You can also roll your blanket up, and if you roll it in a cylinder, it's a little bit more robust. Like it provides a little bit more firm lift. So if you want it to be a little bit thicker, a little bit more of a lift, that would work. The other option, if you've got some yoga blocks, you can put a yoga block under your shoulders and under your head, or you can just lie down and not do any of this extra stuff. I might have lots of furry coworker interference this morning. We'll see how this goes. So, I'm going to get a little higher here. So once you have positioned yourself, oh, by the way, I don't know if I even said hello. Hi, everybody. This is a little yin-yang flow with a little more emphasis on the yin, and probably some really lovely somatic flowy stuff as well. So, that's what I have planned. We'll see how my plans go. So I've got a little bit of support under my legs so that my legs in the butterfly shape kind of hold on a little bit nicely. And then I've positioned this object under my back just a little tiny bit below my shoulder blades. If I were using something more firm like a block, I would go a little bit up higher just to the shoulder blade line. And then if I'm using a blanket, I might go a little lower. And then you can test out if my arms are a little closer in, how does that feel in my shoulder? If I go a little farther out, how does that feel? You could go all the way out to straighter arms. For me, somewhere where if I just kind of stick my arm out and see where it wants to fall, that's generally the best spot. Stay with this pose for a little bit. But it'll help me keep track. Sometimes it feels nice to me to turn my head for a minute or so on one side and then the other. So if you want to join me with that, I'll give you kind of a heads up on when the next minute goes. If it doesn't feel good to turn the head, then don't. Leave your head in the center. Sometimes it feels nice to get just that little tiny bit of extra release through the shoulder and the side of the neck. Be gentle.
going to come back to the center for a moment. I usually take a few breaths there. Just notice if any change has occurred. It sort of feels like my left shoulder's a little closer to closer or a little further down than my right. And then I'm going to turn my head the opposite way, and I'll give you a little heads up after a minute. I'm going to bring my head back to the center. We're going to stay for about another minute. And I'm just kind of noticing if having turned your head for a bit gave it any sense of change to your shoulder girdle or the neck, or just relationship of your head to your shoulders. So take a nice big inhale, and then with your exhale you can kind of assist your legs in coming back to the center. You can just straighten them out. I'm going to roll to my side and take this guy out from under my back. And then come back onto my back and see what happened. This is my favorite part, which is this kind of sensation of everything changing. So the first thing that I notice is just there's kind of a little impression left behind. When I use the blanket, that's more pronounced. When I use something that's a little firmer, like the block, the impression is a little less pronounced. And then the next thing that happens is this kind of sense of my upper back, like just spreading out, and the chest sort of softening and brightening a little bit, which is really lovely. Having a morning where I was feeling really overly emotional for reasons I can't explain. I don't know why. Just feeling like on the verge of getting very emotional. So this feels really nice to sort of a little lighter, a little less intense. So I don't know if it's working for you guys, but hopefully it is. In any case, like, give yourself a little movement as you like. Now we're going to do a movement pattern for the shoulder. So what I try to do when I do this little thing with my chest elevated, especially, I do it a lot lately because I'm spending more time on my computer than I used to. And I also am finding just sort of, like, my posture is getting a little slumpier sometimes. So opening, or maybe I'm curling up a little tighter when I'm sleeping, so there's a little bit more resistance in the morning to opening things up. But now my shoulder feels like it's kind of fallen back into the floor, so I'm inclined, because it feels like it's pretty well aligned, I'm inclined to do this little movement pattern. So I'm going to roll onto my side. I need something to hold my head. So I'm going to use this blanket. You could use your a block if you've got that. And then I'm on my right side, so my right arm's on the bottom, and my left arm's going to do the top part of this. So the first thing I need to check with the first circle, very slowly, is am I going to run into any furniture? So that went pretty well, so I think I'm going to be all right. So you're going to stretch out through your arm that's on top, in my case the left arm, and then slowly reach it over your head, and as you're going all the way through the range of motion, stretch into it until you get to about chest high, right? Then you can soften to bring the arm back around. So we're reaching out, this whole upper part is stretching the arm away. If there's any part of the range of motion that feels tender to you, maybe stop right before that part and pause. And then you can finish a little more softly. So I'm going to do 3 more of these. I think that was 3. Okay, so while I'm here in this position, I'm going to get myself ready. Now, you may not need a strap for this one. What we're going to do is take this top leg, this is my left leg, over the top of the stack like that. The right leg, which is on the bottom, we're going to bring that foot around behind us, and then if you can reach down and grab that foot really easily, then you'll be fine. Grab your foot with your hand. If you cannot reach down and grab your foot really easily, or if you know that's going to cause trouble for your knee, then use something to hold onto your foot, a towel or a strap. I'm going to use the strap because it's really easy. So I put it around my foot, and then I can bring it all the way up and over my shoulder and hold on to it. Okay, quite easily. Now, what I'm after here is a little bit of a sensation in the top of my quad, or the top of my thigh. So I'm going to take my leg backwards so that I feel it stretching out. Okay, and then you can stay laying on your side just like you are, or you can roll your upper back to the floor, and that becomes a little more of a twist. And then I just bring the leg a little further back because now I've got a little more room. I'm holding on to the loop in my strap with my hand, and then I've got this end if I want to let go. So it doesn't have to be a really strong sensation because we're going to stay a little while. So it can be quite mild as long as you feel a little sensation on your hip or top of your thigh. Like it might be more front of your hip, it could be the top of your thigh. If there's any sensation at all, we're in good shape. Sorry about the distraction. This is not the best. Incidentally, I have ordered myself a digital clock that I can see from all the way across the room. It has not arrived yet, but I have ordered this because the other day I was watching my little clock with the hands be used as a ladder by a small coworker of mine who walked up the hands like ladder rungs to get to what she wanted. So it's clear to me that this is why my clock hands are getting so twisted and morphed and weird. So anyway, I've ordered a clock that doesn't have hands, but it's not here yet. So you guys, we're going to use this really obnoxious little timer today, and I apologize in advance for if I neglect it and it beeps really loud. So my thigh has kind of lightened up a little bit, so I'm just kind of dragging it back. I use this left foot just sort of as a way to sort of hold it steady, and I can lean my thigh into it for that little bit of extra sense of security so I can get a little heavier, a little softer everywhere else. So we're just shy of right around a minute more, you guys. Take one more big breath. And then let your foot go. So you're gonna let go with your hand, pick your left leg up or whatever leg you're using, and just kind of bring it out of the way. So then you can just slide your leg along the floor to open up the knee. So I find being really delicate with that opening up. Since the attachments for the quads go around the knee, it's nice to be kind to your knee. Now, we're gonna stay with this right leg, so we're gonna roll onto our back. Take just a moment to release. I'm gonna use a blanket up here. Oh, that's a little bit of a cushion. All right, so then we're gonna take, you're either gonna hold on to your big toe with your peace sign fingers, or you're gonna use some object to hold on to your big toe or your foot. And we'll kind of switch to the back of the thigh. So we did the quads, in front of the hip. Now we're going to do a little bit of the back of the thigh here. So I just want enough sensation that I start to feel something on the back of my thigh, but not too much. I like to let my toes kind of fall down and let my heel sort of fall away, because then it gets a little more into my calf muscles as well. So you can bend your knee to kind of change the pressure, go to a straighter leg. You can rotate the leg a little bit to the outside or a little bit to the inside, and that will just shift the sensation a little bit. Sometimes a little bit like holding a yoga pose in this kind of yin fashion where we just stay a while. Doesn't have to be perfectly static. There can be a little bit of an exploration, or even just a little bit of like a little movement in the toes from time to time. You just want to be mindful. So if you find yourself feeling fidgety, then notice and come back home and kind of pay attention to your breath for a few minutes and settle your mind. But if it's that your body needs a little bit of movement, you just have to trust your intuition on this, because that's basically what we're trying to hone, is our intuition. So if your body is telling you to move a little bit, go for a little bit of movement. It'll be okay. You're still kind of in this range of sensation. Even if I bend my knee, I haven't taken away the sensation. I've just lightened it up a little. Again, this is where the edge is so important. And the edge, again, is not the point where I can't stand it anymore. The edge in yin is the point where I just am feeling that. It's just, oh yeah, I notice that it's there. And maybe even like a little bit intense, but it's definitely not so intense that you're tightening up around it. You want to stay a little bit loose, a little bit friendly with this movement, with this stretch. All right, so we're right at a minute or so left here. Two big breaths. Okay, so to get out of this, I'm gonna like take a little bit of the pressure off the strap, bend my knee enough to let go, and then I'm gonna put my foot really gently back down on the floor. Now we're gonna play with this right leg, but before we get there, just take both feet and either put them on the floor together or stretch your legs all the way out and see if there's a difference between your right side and your left side. might not be a big difference, but for me, the right side always feels so much tighter that even if it feels a little bit closer to even, that's a change. Alrighty, so I'm going to leave my right leg long for a second. I'm going to put my left foot on the ground, and then I'm going to turn my toes up. Now the right leg, you have to check and see, will your leg glide back and forth, or is it going to get hung up on your mat? So if it's going to kind of get hung up on the floor or on the mat, just lift it just to the point where you just barely feel the weight against the floor, and then slide the leg out. So we're going to slide it out all the way, toes turn up, really open up through the top of this thigh, and then we're going to glide it back into this constructive rest position where the left leg is. So toes up, kind of glide your foot out. For me, going out is not so hard. Coming back is definitely more challenging, so there's a little tiny bit of lift, will be all right. The closer to resting your foot on the floor that you can get, the better for the hip flexor anyway. Because when we lift the leg, it just makes the hip flexor fire a little bit. It's not the end of the world. All right, so now we're going to add on to this. This is my movement pattern of the week. So we're going to bring the hands behind the head. You're going to straighten your leg out nice and long and reach out through that hip, and then we're going to bring the knee in and curl up toward it. Keep your head pushing back into your hands so that you've got a little bit of structure for your neck. Stretch the leg all the way out. Curl the knee in. Curl up towards the knee. So resting the heel, stretch the leg all the way out. Toes point up. Last one up the center here. So now we're going to stretch the leg out. Toes are going to point up. Then we're going to bring this knee up to this upper right arm. So we're going to come to the outside and curl in. As you stretch the leg out, turn the toes up. Feel that stretch right there through the front of the hip. And then bring the knee to the outside edge. And then stretch that leg out. And one more time to the outside edge. We're going to do 3 more of these, but we're bringing the knee now towards the left elbow, so coming across in a twist, so stretch. And then bring the leg across and twist up. Stretch. Don't negate that part. That's a really good spot. So stretch out. Really feel that. Oh, last curl in. And then you can let your head go, and then we're just going to stretch that leg out one more time. Excuse me. While it's stretched out, we're going to rotate it through internal to external rotation. Just moving right there at the hip socket. And notice how the different muscle kind of kicks on along this hip. Oh. You might even feel some of it in your butt. All right, one more. Okay, then if you can, glide your foot back into place and let it rest next to the left side for a moment. And then this is my favorite thing, which is to just take your thumb and just right on the top of the hip, where the connective tissue, so the connective tissue comes out of the bowl of the pelvis and out from the spine, and they both make kind of a little ribbon up and over the front of your hip. So I just take my thumb and put my thumb right there in the front of my hip to see if there's a difference. And what I love about this movement pattern is so simple, but it does it every single time. So on my left side, I feel like there's at least an inch. It's probably not that big, but that's how it feels. Higher, right? My thumb is higher on the left side than it is on the right side. So the muscle has been released down into the deeper hip, which means my femur bone is dropping deeper into the hip socket. And this takes a lot of pressure off my low back and off my knee, so it's really lovely. Okay, so with all that in mind, we're gonna do the other side. Just notice if it's true for you, because if you feel that difference, and you're a runner, or you like to cycle, or you sit at a desk all day, and that's why your hip flexors are tight, any of the above, or you're just emotionally stressed out right now, and any of those reasons are why your hip flexors are super tight, this is a great movement pattern to do just every day. Like, it's a little physical therapy for you. All right, I'm going to turn around so my voice kind of keeps carrying in your direction, but you might be able to just roll over, and we'll do this whole thing again on the other side, starting with the shoulder. Now, I know I have to move this way a little bit because the plants stick out further on this side. So hopefully I won't get off your screen. So laying on your side, I've got my right side now on the top and my left side on the bottom. Okay. So I'm reaching my right arm out, and before I reach too far, I just want to make sure I can make this range of motion without running into the furniture or the plants. So far, so good. Okay, reach through that arm, and as it goes overhead, we're just stretching, allowing the body, whoops, yep, okay. See, all I have to do is stretch it out a little longer, and then me and the plants find each other. All right, I'm going to try it again. I'm going to try to avoid my friend here. Oh. It's wild to me how much more room I get when I start stretching it out. How much farther I can reach. Sort of reminds me of, like, you know, when you have something that's like rolled under the bed or under the couch, and get under there and like reach your arm out there, try to get that thing. It's like just a tiny bit farther than your arm. Maybe do this first. 2 more. Stretch. Try to avoid the plant by curling my fingertips. There we go. Stretch. Oops, still made it. Alrighty. So once I come all the way back, just giving my shoulder a little moment, and then I'm going to go ahead and hook myself up for the cat pulls its tail. So right leg's coming across. That means my left foot's going to come around behind me. Oops, sorry, buddy. All right. So I'm reaching down to grab hold of that strap, foot, as the case may be. And then I'm bringing my left thigh backwards. Now, each of us is going to find that we have one hip that's a little tighter, one hip that's a little looser. So this could be your looser hip or your tighter hip. I'm going to roll myself into the twist and then make the little adjustment, because that always gives me a tiny bit more room. Okay. And so then we just hold for a bit. Try to take like the deepest breaths possible without straining, right? So just breathe with my whole body without it becoming like rhinoceros breathing. Just deep and smooth and rhythmic. You can do Ujjayi breath too, if you're familiar with Ujjayi breath. I'll try to describe it. So essentially what happens is when you're talking, your vocal cords are vibrating. The air that we're breathing vibrates over the vocal cords, so that creates the sound. So what you're going to essentially do is create just a little bit of a sense of restriction around the vocal cords, so that as you're breathing, the air passes through the vocal cords and gives you this little, it's like a seashell against your ear sound. If you go full Darth Vader, that's a little too much. But I've heard it that loud, but it's a little on the extreme side, and that maybe we're trying to prove something. So you can decide if you, it's your breathing practice, your ear house, do what you want. But if you can find a little more gentleness with it, it's a little nicer. So not quite so forceful. Just kind of, and for me it just feels like, not like swallowing, but there's just like a tiny bit of a sense that I'm kind of closing my glottis just a notch. And it's easier for me on the inhale part of the breath. For other people, it's easier on the exhale part of the breath. So we're in the last minute here, by the way. This creates this kind of ocean-like background, just kind of wave action with breath, which is lovely. And it gives you something to really focus your mind on. So it's a great breath for days when you feel kind of scattered and you want to do a sort of meditative practice, but you're having trouble meditating. So it works really great for that. Take one more big breath, whether it's Ujjayi or not. And then we're going to let go. again, I'm going to pick that leg up out of the way so I can just unfurl the knee while it's still on the ground. And then kind of slowly, I feel, there's a moment where I just feel like there's been a softening or there's been a shift, and I know, okay, I can move again in a little bit more dramatic way. Initially, coming out of yin pose, this feels really vulnerable, and then it feels really nice. All right, so we're gonna do the hamstrings on that same leg. So, kind of find your way into stretch. I'm going to have a little bit of support from my opposite leg, and it feels nice to have a little extra support around the edges. So I have a blanket there, but you don't need one if you don't have one. If you want to try it, just kind of tuck it in a little around your hip and see if that makes you feel a tiny bit like you can kind of lean into the edges of the blanket. It feels nice. Okay. So we'll hang out here for a few minutes. Up from underneath the strap. And again, you can add those little changes, like you could do a slightly more bent knee or a slightly turned out or turned in leg. Trying to subtly get the strap a little closer up my toes. And again, you can hold onto your foot with your hand. And actually, it's a kind of interesting way too. Often for me, it creates a kind of a stretch around my pec and around my shoulder. So just holding up and kind of allowing the leg to pull on my shoulder a little bit is sometimes quite pleasant. There's a variation on this theme called, a pose called, I can't remember exactly how to pronounce the word in Sanskrit, but it's called Vishnu's snake couch pose. So the god Vishnu, if you're unfamiliar with Hindu mythology, or that may not be the right word for it, but in any case, there are essentially kind of different forces in the universe are kind of represented by these different deities, and so the deity Vishnu is sort of a sustaining force in the world. So when things are kind of going along in an even keel, that's often the influence of Vishnu, although he also shows up in various incarnations on the planet when there is a need for strong leadership. So like Krishna is considered an incarnation of Vishnu, and there's some others along the way as well. So in any case, Vishnu is often depicted taking a nap, laying on his side on this couch, floating on the ocean. The couch is made out of snakes, so the whole bottom of the couch, and then there's like this arching sort of shelter over him, all made out of snakes. So there's cobras like spread their little hoods out. There's usually multiple heads to this couch. So there's all these little cobras kind of with their little hoods all lined up to protect Vishnu. So there's a pose named after that, and I am charmed. It just charms me to have this pose named after Vishnu's couch. It's hilarious, but in any case, so sometimes I do it just because I like it. It just charms me to think about it. So we have 1 minute left, yogis, just in case we're worried. Take 2 more big breaths. And then let go of whatever you might be holding on want to kind of gently release your leg. Again, I'm just going to release it down to the floor to start with. And then I'm going to let it stretch all the way out straight so I can kind of experience whether there's kind of an overall sense that my leg has gotten a little longer, a little softer. Is there a little more of a sense of symmetry between the right side and the left? It's possible that now your left leg is longer. That does sometimes happen. And then we're going to bring the legs back to this constructive rest position, and we're just working with the left one to start with. So we'll do a few rounds of this action. And again, you can gently float the foot a little bit if it's too sticky to do the glide. So I'm going to lift my toes. It's easier for me to glide on the very tip of my heel, and then just press the foot out. Go nice and smooth if you can, keeping the toes pointing up, stretching out to the front of the hip, and then drawing the legs slowly back into that constructive rest, and then pausing. So letting ourselves release this really deep part of the hip flexor in this action, right? So we'll feel it when we get to the very edge, but the whole way that we're sort of dragging this foot in, we're activating or creating this action in this muscle. So we're going to do it one more time like this. Sometimes I like to try to feel that really subtle movement, deep, deep, deep. This muscle does not have a lot of nerve endings because it's so deep in the body, and most of our sensory nerves are on the outside of the body, so that we'll, know that we're hot or we're cold or that we should protect ourselves in some fashion. The nervous system did not waste its energy. it put the nerves where it thought we could use them the best, so that if we weren't particularly bright, we would still get it. This is my theory on the way the nervous system has treated us. In any case, we're gonna do the stretch out curl in. So we're gonna stretch out the leg, and again, stretch to the front of the hip, spread out the toes, flex the ankle, and then the whole thing comes in straight up the middle, and we curl up to meet it. And then stretch the leg out. Spread out the toes if you can, curl up to meet it. Stretch it out and curl it in. Okay, so now when we come back in, we're going to go to that left elbow. So we're going to come out to the edge. And again, don't skip on this part. So really slowly glide that leg out. Spread the toes out, flex the foot, stretch the front of the hip. And then curl in. So reaching it out and bring it in. All right, so now I'm going to come across towards my right elbow. So after that stretch out, I'm going to bring the knee across and twist up to the side. So stretch, feel that length that happens. Come into the curl. We got one more of those to go. Stretch it out. Curl it in. So I can let go of my head now. I'm going to stretch this leg all the way out. And right there, I'm just going to pivot. I don't know if this even shows up on camera, but just move your leg kind of back and forth in this internal external rotation. You could, if you put your hand right there, or you can just feel it, from the inside. But you can feel how these muscles kick on. There's your tensor fasciolata muscle, because that helps internally rotate the thigh. And you might, as you externally rotate, feel your butt kick on. That's your piriformis and its friends. So it's fun. If you don't know where some of these muscles are, you can at least kind of start to feel them as you move the leg. It's cool. All right, so I'm going to glide my leg back. Maybe it's only cool to me. I should probably stop sharing that. Anyway, if I put my finger, my thumb right there in my hip, right there at the front of my hip, I can feel how the left side and the right side are now pretty much even. There might be a slight difference, but I'm not picking up on it. And so that lift that I was feeling on the left side when I was done with the right, and that deeper sense on the right, is now the same on both sides. So I have released my hip flexors in nice and deep into my socket. So that's really lovely. And especially if you know, if you have some chronic low back pain, but it's not related to a herniated disc, this could help. I don't know, you should probably see a doctor. Sometimes, like, I get like slightly funky bee pain on the outside edge of my knee, and then I know I need to do some of this kind of work, because this, if my hip is being forced slightly forward, it'll put the pressure into my knee to stabilize me. So if I get that kind of thing, I know I need to stretch the front of my hip and do some of these things to help me release the quads and the hip flexors. All right. So all that being said, I'm gonna flip over like a little pancake, smooch over the edge here, and then just roll myself over. And we'll start with a few cobras. So hands on the mat, high up. So we're gonna move the hands back. Here, let me move this out of the way. So we're gonna start with the hand pretty high up so that it's above the line of the shoulder. Then we're gonna go back about an inch, and then about an inch, and then about an inch, and then about an inch. And when we get back to here where the palm doesn't want to sit on the floor very much, don't worry about doing that, because the wrist is tricky. So you can even come up onto the tips of your fingers as we get a little further back. As you lift up, things will shift. So with the hands really high, I'm essentially going to draw the shoulders just a little wider as I lift. So anchor through your legs, press the front of your hip into the floor, and then lift into your cobra. So you're strengthening the muscles in the back, and we're broadening through the chest. And then come on back down. Slide your hands back about an inch. Press the whole hand into the floor if you can. Lift, really anchor through the front of the hip and the thigh, tops of the toes. Broaden the chest. Good, come on back down. You can take a little moment in between if you want. Slide your hands back, spread the hands out. Press the palms into the floor as you lift. Collarbones nice and wide. Trying to keep any stress out of my neck. Okay, coming on back down. So now it's starting to get a little funky for my wrists. I'm just more careful here. As I lift, I usually have less pressure. So broaden out through the collarbones. But I get one of the best collarbone stretches from this little area. Like, I just feel a lot more sense of release there. So coming back one more time, pressing the front of the hip down, lifting the legs, drawing the collarbones wide, trying to keep my neck just doing its job of holding my head up. Reaching through my legs a little farther. 2 more breaths, just be mindful. Last one. Good. Come on back down. You can release anything. All right, we're going to do a frog pose. Now, the frog pose is can be quite intense on the groins. So we're not trying to tear anything, y'all. We want to be gentle. So we're going to go back to start with to a wide knee child's pose. Okay? So that's where this begins. So knees are wide. You can touch your toes together, but you don't have to. And then you're just going to send your hips back, propped up on your elbows. If you want to, you can use a pillow or a yoga bolster under your chest instead. So if that feels like you don't need any more sensation in your inner thighs or groins or the hip, you're good. Stay right there. And if you feel like you don't feel anything at all, right? There's no edge at all, then you can think about doing it this way. So you'll take the legs maybe a tiny bit wider, and maybe flip your little feet out like little frog flippers, and then ease yourself back. Now for me, this gets much spicier. So I do somewhere in between. I point the toes back, but go a tiny notch wide. And then we're just gonna hold here for about 2 minutes. And again, if it's too spicy, back off. Don't go that far. If you're tensing up and like, oh, I don't know if I can stand this pose anymore, that's too far. It's intense, this pose. It has a lot of vibe to it. What's kind of fun about it is that time slows down. So 2 minutes will feel like 4, but it's really only going to be 2. I could make time slow down in other ways, that would be awesome. But I don't want to spend the rest of my life in this pose. Take one minute left. I told you it was slow. Big breaths left. Take a nice big inhale. And then to get out of this, we're going to come forward a little bit. Now, if you're in the YD child's pose, you can probably just kind of hang out with that. But if you're doing the frog, we're going to tuck the toes under on one leg. We're going to lift really firmly through the belly and pick the leg up to bring it back. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. It won't be as dramatic because we're a little less wide. But that action of kind of integrating through the low belly and the pelvis and the inner thighs is really helpful, I find, to prevent any sort of accidental tearing on the way out of the pose. There are other ways to get out of there, but that one I think is potentially the most secure. Now, we're going to do a lunge. So I'm going to take my left leg and bring that forward first since I'm on this side of the mat. And then you can add some props if you want to. I'm going to grab this pillow that I had earlier. And then we're going to kind of lean forward into this. Now again, I'm going to make this a little bit somatic. So I'm going to use this just so I have a little bit of stability. But I've picked my shin up. That keeps my knee happy. You may find it's just fine without doing that. But if your knee feels a little funky doing this rolling back and forth movement, see what happens if you lift your shin. Because sometimes just that engagement through the quads keeps my knees feeling a little safer. So coming forward and going backward. All right, so I'm going to come forward just to the point where I feel that. I'm going to let my leg relax. And then I'm just kind of giving myself like a little arm rest here. And the right side of my hip is much more sensitive, especially after that frog. So I'm being very conservative, very gentle. I just feel that stretch on the front of my thigh, front of my hip. It's more hip than thigh. Now, usually after a minute or so, this lets go, but we're not going to stay very long. We're only staying for like about another minute. So kind of slowly, if it gives me permission, I will creep myself in. You could also, if you wanted to, add like some arm lifting or wrap your arms behind your back and lace your fingers together, that sort of jazz. So you can add on to the pose in that way. I'm trying to keep myself relaxed, so I'm only going to do so much. We're going to take a big breath. And essentially all I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn to the diagonal here, back my hip off, and then put both my hands on the floor at this diagonal position. Okay, so on the diagonal, bringing my hands so that essentially my wrist is under my shoulder with slightly more forward. I want to be mindful of this hip, so I'm only going to dip down so low. So I'm going to shift my hips back into the lunge, then I'm going to bend at the elbow to kind of lower into Chaturanga Dandasana and push up. Now what I like about doing it this way is I can really focus on the structure of my upper back, okay? So as I'm dipping, I'm hugging the shoulder blades a little deeper into my back, keeping my arms really close to my ribs, and then pushing back up. So I've got a little bit more support structure with the legs in this position, so I can really kind of anchor in and feel the integrity in the shoulders. Okay, I'm going to do that one more time. Pushing back up, I'm going to ease my hips back and reach reach into this diagonal so I get this stretch a little more towards my inner thigh on the hamstrings there. Go back and forth a few times. Just be mindful of the exit and entry points. All right. So then I'm going to do that on the other side. So coming around this way so I can keep the open side toward you guys. I'm not sure if it makes a difference, but in the event it does, we'll have it here. Okay, so first we're going to just do this little movement pattern of kind of shifting forward and shifting back. Shifting forward and shifting back. So just feeling out where the edges are. And then we're going to hang out with this stretch for about a minute or so, a minute and a half-ish is how long we're going to totally be here. Again, you could like do the arm bind or your arms over your head. There's lots of different options for being in this position, so you can kind of mess with it a little bit. Take about 3 more deep breaths. Okay, so with my exhale, I'm going to send my hips back a little bit. Just take the pressure away a little bit. Put both hands over here to the diagonal. Okay, then I'm going to feel my way slightly more forward into this lungy shape, being mindful and nice and strong in the shoulders. Doing the little chaturanga dip and back to straight. Dip and back to straight. I'm really trying to keep the integrity of my torso and my upper arms, really keeping those together. So, ooh, I'm definitely feeling it in my arms for sure. Keep the shoulders nice and strong. Last one for me. And then I'm going to send my hips back while I'm at this diagonal. And again, you can kind of migrate a little more bent, a little more straight. Just being really slow and mindful there. Every movement in a yoga pose has like a beginning, a middle, and an end zone, right? So like when I first start moving, there's a little bit of hesitancy, then there's a smoothness, and then near the end it gets a little bit more sharp or a little bit more interesting. So just noticing that sort of sense of spectrum. So I'm going to come up, I'm going to bring this leg back. And then do a few rounds of cat here. To a seated position when you're ready. Now I'm more comfortable with the legs a little on the wider side. You might be more comfortable with the legs a little on the closer together side. So you're just going to pick one of those. I'm going to do one more little sequence here. So first, just
sinking my hips down into the seat and then turning in one direction. You can turn the legs on a little bit more. That's going to give you more of a yang sense. You can let the legs relax a little bit more. Notice if you're picking one sit bone up off the floor, see if you can keep the sit bones nice and stable. And then I'm going to turn my head in the opposite direction. So I'm going to inhale, look over my right shoulder, and exhale and look over my left shoulder. I'll do that about 4 more times. If you're up for it, go for it. So then I'm going to take this whole thing and bring it into a little, oops, sorry buddy, bring it into a side stretch. So since I was kind of facing my left, it's easiest to go over the right side. Take about 4 big breaths here. And so one more. And then come all the way up and pause for a moment right in the center. Definitely notice if there's like a asymmetry that happens. So there'll be a moment where everything sort of settles, or there's just a sense of releasing. And at that moment, then turn the opposite direction. And again, just pause for a second with the twist. Wherever you landed, notice if you're sort of leaning out of your sit bones, see if you can mostly keep the sit bones level. Again, you can really activate the legs or let them be a little bit more relaxed. And then again, I'm going to do this little head turning, inhaling over my left shoulder this time and exhaling over the right. More. Here I'm going to take a nice big breath, and then I'm going to let myself side bend over to the left. Yeah, we're not here forever, but about 4 more deep breaths, maybe 5. Big inhale, and bring you up. Give yourself a little bit of a movement pattern of some sort. All right, last thing before Shavasana is to fold straight down the center. And again, you can energize the legs, even bend the knees a bit. Or you can also choose to not sit, you just sit up tall. Because for some of us, that's going to be hard enough, just sitting up. Trying to spread my toes apart, taking about 3 more deep breaths. One of the things that I'm working on right now is spreading my toes apart without pulling my big toe backwards. It's not easy. I'm working on it. Last big breath here. And then we're going to come all the way back up. Oh, bend the knees. Now I have no idea what time it is exactly because my clock is stuck because it's been used as a ladder. But I'm thinking we're pretty close to Shavasana. So if I am screwing this up, I apologize. But in any case, we're going to put a pillow underneath the legs. I'm going to put a little blanket underneath my head. On my way down, I'm going to take an opportunity to do a little extra core work and try to roll down really slow. So I make my hip flexors that I've been working on this whole time do a little extra work. Oh, that's where they let go. They were like, that's it, we're
of Shavasana you're going to do, whether you lay on your back or you lay on your side or you lay on your belly. Just do something that allows you to give yourself a chance to really let go and relax. It's a rainy Saturday morning here. I don't know what it's like where you are, but it's a good excuse as any to let yourself lie down for a bit. Now, if your mind tends to be kind of agitated and active, you can give it something to do. So you can either pay attention to the breath coming and going, or you can give it something to think about. So you can give it a visualization to experiment with. My favorite is to sort of just imagine myself in what right now is my favorite place in nature. Sometimes that's the beach, sometimes it's, you know, in the mountains or next to a little babbling brook in my brain with dappled sunlight coming through the trees. So you just imagine yourself in this beautiful place of nature. Sometimes weird images show up for me. Like once when I decided to do this, I was laying on a leaf in the middle of the ocean. So you never know what your brain will produce for you. It's really fun to find out. But or you can just manufacture that for yourself. You can decide what you're going to see. But in any case, so a little bit of a visualization is a way to organize and kind of keep the brain active. If you tend towards fidgetiness in this final pose, if that's not your concern, then just let go and be present. It'll also work that way. We're just going to notice the breath again. You want that little seashell breath, just bring it across your vocal cords a couple times. let it go with a big deep sigh. And then wiggle your fingers and toes. Stretch them out. And then move the wrist and ankles. Give your whole body a big stretch. And then give yourself a little hug and a back massage. When you're ready, come on up. Thank you so much for joining me on Saturday morning. Hopefully you're okay with today's practice and you enjoyed it. Let's take a nice big breath together. And a sigh. Namaste, yogis.